Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, there we go. Hello, everyone. All around the world tuning in, far and wide.
I think people from other planets listen as well? Or just the
I
world?
hope so. I bet we're really popular on Schnib Schnarb.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Is that another planet?
I don't know. I'm just assuming it probably is.
The wheels fell off real quick.
Is that the star you bought for your wife? Did you buy your wife a star once?
No, it's the name of the shark.
I'm not that
It's the name of the shark he's tracking through the ocean.
Oh.
What?
You can do that. You can buy a little bracelet and it has the name and you can sign into a website and it has the tracker and you can track a shark or it's like a shark or a whale.
To be in your algorithm just sounds amazing. Like I want to get there. Yeah, that's just crazy.
You guys don't see that kind of stuff?
Nope.
What?
Too much Baby Shark you've been watching.
No,
and like,
that's
you
like
my sharks.
that's the
track
least.
Shark do.
That's my least played song.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. All
right. Back on track.
Back on track, and being on track for us a lot of times is about listening to voicemails.
Yep.
So, do we have any of those?
We have a voicemail.
That's
Here it
exciting.
Hey guys, it's Natalie. I know it's been a while since you guys have heard from me, but hey, I just got off work from a very busy day. And I don't know if anybody's known, but I actually work for Omaha Steaks. Yum. So anyways, I'm just wondering, have you guys ever had Omaha Steaks? And if so, what is your favorite product? And if you haven't, let me know. I can always hit you up. Anyways, love hearing from you guys, and I always love your shows. Have a great day. Bye.
That's so nice.
It's like that time of year, Memorial Day coming up.
Get those grills out.
We'll just bring a charcoal grill right in here in the studio, right between me and Alex. We can flip the burgers while we're having a conversation. Omaha Steaks, they do not sponsor this show, by the way. That felt like maybe a little bit of an ad.
If they wanted.
I don't know how much they paid Natalie to sneak in there.
Natalie, did they pay you to call us? Obviously, they pay you because you work there, but did they pay you extra?
Yeah, to get that ad on there.
Yeah, especially our show.
Though, like when you travel other places, they know Omaha Steaks.
They do.
Funny.
When I got married, my in-laws had been ordering Omaha Steaks.
That's all they knew about Omaha.
Yes, that is all
the
they
steaks.
knew. Right.
Yeah.
They didn't know about me.
Yeah.
The Omaha Steaks.
I feel like it's one of those things not a lot of Omaha people like
partaking.
That could just be us, though. Maybe there is like this pocket of people that just...
There's certainly people, for sure, yeah.
Have we had Omaha Steaks?
Well, because like every time I've ever seen anything referenced to Omaha or Nebraska, like on a late night talk show or something like that, people are giving gifts of like an Omaha steak box, or you'll hear it sponsored on a podcast. But I personally have never, that I know of. Maybe I've been to someone's house and they had it. I don't know. But as far as I know, I've never had it.
I have definitely had Omaha Steaks. I'm not afraid to barter, you know. I've even been paid one time, I think, to do a funeral in Omaha Steaks.
This just seems like an ethical quandary.
I don't think I actually got paid to do it, but I did someone's, memorial service.
They gave it to you as a gift.
Yeah, and that was the gift for...
Let's say it that way next time.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm over here like...
They're like, hey, how do we... what's the honorarium? If I could get 3 ribeyes and
okay.
bratwurst. Good. Thank you for letting me clarify that, Eric. That did not roll off the tongue quite the right way.
I can't with you guys.
The beef tongue.
Yeah.
The beef tongue.
Yeah. Have you had it, Jess?
The first time I had Omaha Steaks was in Connecticut.
Oh, okay. Your in-laws.
I've been ordering it. That was probably like almost 13 years ago.
Wow.
My brother, there's a competition between the in-laws in my family to like one up themselves in gifts. It's called Tin Wars. So usually someone finds the biggest tin and puts stuff in it for my dad. But one year, my brother-in-law Sam tried to one up the Tin Wars by just going straight for the Omaha Steaks box.
Oh, wow.
And he did win, but there's an asterisk because it's like
it
wasn't delivered in a tin. But
well,
that's my interaction with Omaha Steaks.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be opposed to trying it, but
Yeah,
I'll have to do some funerals, I guess.
That's the
Oh
way.
my goodness! I thought we were just as quick as we're back on track. We
You're
just
off.
like hit a rut.
Yeah,
Filet
let's-
mignon, always good.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. I remember once my mom telling my brother her two favorite steaks were filet mignon and sirloin, and he's like, "Well, why don't you just order T-bone then, Mom? Because it's like same cuts, both combined." Yeah. Anyways, meat facts. That's what you're
Meat
here for.
facts.
You're here to learn about meat.
Love it.
And you're here to hear an interview with Dr.
was
Curt
so
Thompson. Jess, you got a chance
Yes.
to sit down with the one and only Dr. Curt
It
Thompson.
was so great. We had a good time. You'll be able to tell.
Okay.
I think we liked each
I'm
other.
excited to listen.
Yes, it was great.
So if you're excited to listen and you're listening right now, don't go anywhere.
Please don't.
Yeah. I like to act like they're listening on a radio and they could switch the station or something. It's fun for me. Don't change that dial. Stay tuned for Dr. Curt Thompson.
Today I am joined by Curt Thompson. Welcome.
Thanks, Jess.
Welcome, doctor. We talked about that before. Where I'm like, is it Curt? Is it Mr. Thompson?
Yeah. My
Dr.
wife,
Curt Thompson.
I sometimes wish my wife would call me Dr. Thompson, but she just can't find it within herself to stoop that low.
So today we're just calling you Curt.
There you go.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And you've done
Thank
a
you.
lot of work. I'm really excited that you're here today because you've done a lot of work as an author and you're doing a lot of work in therapy and psychology, and brain work. You've just done so much. And so I'm just happy that you're here today to talk a little bit about some of the things that you work on and just to hear your insight.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more than, or probably better than I just did? Who are you? What do you do?
No, my name is Dr. Curt Thompson.
Okay. We established it again.
Yes. I am, so some important things about me, I would say, are that I've been married for 36 and a half years. I have a daughter who's 32 and a son who's 29. And my wife's name is Phyllis. And those relationships are hugely important to me. And I've been shaped by a church community in Washington, D.C., where I live and work over the last more than 30 years. And I meet with a group of men, three other men every Tuesday. I've been doing this for the last 27 years, and meet with a covenant group, three other couples for about 30 years. And I would say that those relational dynamics have shaped me, in addition to having a spiritual director that I meet with once a month. Because I'm not to be trusted. I tell people I'm not just a sinner, I'm a professional sinner. I think anytime you've been doing something for a long time and you're really good at it, you can call yourself a pro. So I need that. And then what I do for a living, that work often finds itself in times and spaces when I'm not getting paid for it, is that I'm a psychiatrist. And I was trained in medical school and residency, and then moved to the Washington, D.C. area in 1992, where we've been essentially there for the last 30 plus years in private practice. And right now I am part of a practice where I think there are 8 clinicians, and I tell people, number one, I don't deserve my life. Number two, there are just many, many different elements of it that are reasons for that. I can't believe I get paid to do what I do. The practice that I work in just have clinicians who are serious about following Jesus and serious about the work that they do. And we do a lot. I see individuals. I have seen couples and adolescents in the past. I don't do as much of that work. I'm mostly seeing individuals because a lot of the work we now do is in this realm of what we call confessional communities, and we may end up talking about that. But development of group process work, which is really important to us. And I would think that I will do this kind of work as long as I'm able to. I love it. I realize that not everybody gets to have as much joy in the work that they do to earn a living, and so I'm just really grateful for that. And I think gratitude is the word that is my response for just about everything in my life. So.
And you've also written a couple books. And what kind of has led you to writing that and wanting to share your journey, like what you've learned about the brain? And I think it's just, you do a good a good job of connecting spirituality with how the brain is developed, and how did that come to be?
Well, I think it was now about 20 years ago, not about close to that, 20 years ago, I began, it was early in the kind of ascendance of the work of a friend and colleague Dan Siegel, and was introduced to this notion of interpersonal neurobiology, this combination of the brain and relationships and how they speak to each other, all kinds of different things that we were discovering about the way the mind works, what the mind is, what a flourishing mind looks like, that was new to the field of psychiatry in general. And that quickly became something that I was also being curious about through the lens of a Christian anthropology. What does it mean for us as people who follow Jesus and who turn to texts, the texts of the Scriptures, as our foundation for understanding what it means for us to be human and what is God's design for us, and how does any and all of these mechanics that we are learning about neuroscience, about how the brain and relationships work together, how does any of that shed light on the Scriptures, and how do the Scriptures shed light on it? So a lot of my work has been in thinking about the intersection of the neuroscience and these elements of Christian spiritual formation for as long as I've actually been in this work, but in particular ways the last 15 to 20 years. And then I would say, as I began to get my feet wet and really start to do this work back about 20 years ago, eventually it got to a point where trying to explain these things to patients was becoming kind of cumbersome, because you were doing it with every new patient that you would see.
Right.
And so the first book that I wrote, I think in no small part, was a way for me to try to package things in a way that people could then read and have access to. And my sense was I'm writing this book primarily for patients, maybe for other people who might be interested in this topic, but I thought I was writing one book, and I was... Is
that the Anatomy of
the Soul, which is the first one, right? And then as it turned out, other things emerged from that, and work emerged that I was not anticipating. Like, Jess, there's no way 10 years ago I would have imagined that I would be sitting here in Omaha,
right,
having a conversation with you on this podcast, which I'm just utterly delighted to do. And so I'm often like looking around me thinking, what am I doing here? Because these are not things that I was planning on doing. There was no grand plan. It's more a matter of, taking each day at a time. I just tried to steward what's in front of me, and it turned out that the work that I was doing had a lot of resonance with a lot of people, and people who were responsive to it, and that just created more opportunity for more work and more thinking and more writing, and then we, there you have it. And now we have little podcasts that we do.
And it's something too where it's like you said, like mental health, and I think our discovery and journey through it, it is slowly progressing. So even 10 years ago, it's like, even thinking about, I did not grow up even with the knowledge that my brain could be connected to my spirituality, or even just like how I'm processing. And so just how much we've grown up not understanding a lot about ourselves, but then in the Bible reading, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and understanding we're complicated. And so,
right. Well, I mean, we come by it honestly. We're at the tail end of 500 years worth of modernity and rationalism and the Enlightenment, which kind of tended to separate the way that we think about the material world. We have the material world over on one side, and then we have this thing that we call the spiritual realm over on the other side. And the way we then end up thinking about spirituality and the spiritual realm and so forth, anywhere from around the 1500s on, would be something, and a way of thinking about it that the ancient Hebrews would not even find recognizable. Those would be people who would just assume that everything about the world, whether it's the material world, the interior world, the world between you and me relationally, all of this is spiritual. All of this is governed by the Spirit of God, and all of this is under the authority and the kingship of Jesus. So we've culturally, and even in the church, we've culturally kind of like been drinking the Kool-Aid that tells us that our spiritual lives are somehow in this realm that doesn't really have to do with the material universe. My body, not the least. And so this is why older traditions, such as Orthodox and Catholic traditions, that pay a lot of attention to the role of the body, have been helpful, especially in recent years as neuroscience has come back onto the stage. And interestingly enough, the neuroscience itself is kind of turning around and pointing at modernity and saying, we've got some problems here. And it's even looking at postmodernity and saying, we've got some problems there as well. And so the very science that grew out of the Enlightenment is turning around and back, and like it is kind of asking the Enlightenment to kind of take a look at itself, not trying to do so condemningly, but trying to do so helpfully. And in the process, it is, I think, reintroducing us to an experience of what it means to be Jesus followers that would be much closer to that which people were experiencing when it was happening in real time and space.
And then it just even, as you're saying that, it's like the moving into the concept of was really challenging for me when I started to go through your book, and as I've listened to your podcast, of just the concept of being known, because I think it's intricate to who we are. We want to be known and understood, and we want to know and understand people, but how difficult that seems to be.
Well, again,
or it feels that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's a thing I think we come by honestly in that, our very first parents, Adam and Eve, we like to talk about there. They were naked and unashamed, and on the precipice of creating and curating beauty in the world. And then they had that, that conversation with the snake that didn't go well for anybody, and even in the context of that conversation in Genesis chapter 3, we see this movement from being naked, from being vulnerable, from like acknowledging, oh, this is actually who we are. It's not a thing that I choose to be or not choose to be. I am, which is why I wear clothing, which is why I protect myself. They would have lived with the understanding. We're just naming, yes, I need you. You need me. I need you for protection. I need you for help. You need me for the same reasons. And that's how we're going to live our lives, because we can do that because shame's not part of the conversation. When shame enters that conversation in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, we find that everything about that vulnerability kind of gets turned on its head. And so I become, instead of longing to be with you and to be seen by you, even in my nakedness, I now can't, right, I'm going to cover myself. I don't like this process of being seen, being known. And so I forget quickly that to not be seen is to not be loved. And in order for me to be loved, I must be seen. So when Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2, there are those who think they know who do not know as they ought. But the person who loves God is known by God. Notice he doesn't say the person who loves God knows God. The person who loves God. I can only love God in response to the degree that the parts of me that I really don't like have been known by God, loved by God, and then I love him in response. We work really hard in the wake of our traumas and our shame to protect ourselves, and in so doing, that protection keeps you out and keeps me from being loved. So if to the degree that I'm not known, especially the parts of me that are most tender, those are the parts that are not loved. And I'm going to have to burn a lot of energy containing all that, protecting all that. And that is energy that I then don't have available to, with God and with others, partner to create the beauty and goodness that he longs for us to create in the world.
I wonder if that's why also a lot of people would, in that same conversation, even say they feel isolated and alone, because in being known, you have to expose yourself, which brings up your shame and separation.
Right, potentially. I mean, it does. It brings it up, and it does so with intention. Right, there is a sense in which, when Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me?" he's not trying to get information that he doesn't already have. It is a tactic to invite Peter to turn the stone over where the shame is, because Jesus wants Peter to know in front of everybody else. They're like, we both know that we both know. Well, we all know that you did, and we're okay. I just need you now to stop paying attention to your shame and start paying attention to me. But I can't have you do that until we first have you see, and like in front of everybody, they're like, it's here. We're all like, we're good. Now we have work to do. And to the degree that I'm not answering that question, I am still going to be burning energy to keep it concealed. And that will be parts of me that Jesus can't use to create. He's waiting. I want to use the parts that you hate the most actually to create the most beauty in the world, which of course doesn't make any sense to us. But who would imagine that resurrection would come from crucifixion? Only God would imagine that.
And so how do we interact with that? I mean, I'm thinking like for me, it's like if I empathize with someone that's maybe never explored or gone down this track before, I'm thinking, where do I start? I don't even want to start because it feels like so much. So what's like a good place to start? Is it maybe finding a space of community? Does it start with just yourself?
If I'm the person, if I'm which person?
If I'm the person that I know that I want to be known, but where do I start? Like, what's a good first?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, we live in a culture that when we encounter hard things, when we're like coming to terms with like, oh yeah, this is a thing that I want to do. Oh, this being known thing. I never thought about that. And then I do think about it. I'm like, I actually try to avoid being known because now I know why I do. Oh, all right, Jess is saying this is a good thing. I'll try that. And then I'm like, I'm not so sure that I want, because I have all these stories that I would, well, if I were to tell people about my story, like what would happen and all these things. And so what I then want is I want Jess to tell me like how I can do this and it not be painful.
Right.
I would like Jess to tell me how to do this and this will be easy.
And I'm calling you.
You're
saying you tell me, Dr. Curt Thompson.
Oh, that is we said earlier today, that is a well-played card. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I think
I'm Googling.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think this is part of what is important about loving people. We've said if you're going to receive treatment from a physician for anything, if they're doing their job well, they're going to say like, okay, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to go over the side effects to let you know. And we're not going over the side effects to frighten you. We're not going over the side effects to keep you from doing it. We're going over the side effects so that when they happen, you won't just be aware of the facts. Being aware of the facts will also will remind you that you and I have talked about them. And you will be aware that I'm thinking about you. It's not just a matter of informing you. It is a matter of forming you. It is a matter of, I want you to know that I'm not going to leave you alone on this journey. That's why I tell you about side effects, not because I just want you to have a thing that we call information so you'll know what to do if this happens or that happens. And so one of the important things that we do is to let people, so if, for our listeners, if you're interested in this, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find Jess's private phone number and call her. That's what you're going to do.
Well played,
see if we can get that out on the screen. Can you bring that up on the screen? That phone number? Yes, 1-800. But I mean, I think it's important to know that walking into this space in which we want to be known, it would be important to know that it will be hard. It might be hard to do, but it's not hard because you're stupid or because you're weak or just because you're afraid. It will be hard because there is a part of your mind that is aware that the journey toward intimacy,
being more than just we think sex or. I just like to clarify that, and I said sex first.
Yeah, that's right. That journey toward there being another layer of my life being revealed to you is one in which if I've had things that have happened to me that are painful, they will have happened in the context of relationships. And just to not put put a fine point on it, they often happen in context of sex. And so, which is why when we use that word intimacy, like we often jump to sex because the felt sense of fear and shame that is embodied in that domain, the domain of sexuality, often ends up percolating out into and touching all kinds of other parts of our lives. And so for someone to have access, for me to give someone access to some part of me that I long to be healed, it means it's also going to conjure the memory for me of where and when that trauma took place in the first place. And that's not a place I want to spend time going. And that memory, that anticipation that, Jess, if I let you into that room in my house, you're just going to see what's there like everybody else would see what's there. And then you're going to say, like, this is a horrible room. I'm not coming. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. And so some of what can be helpful is for you to say to me, Curt, I just want to let you know, this might happen. We might get to a room in your house and you're not going to want to let me come in. And I'm never going to use a crowbar. I'm never going to force my way in. But I want to let you know that when things, if we're going to do this work, you might find yourself feeling anxious. You might find yourself feeling worried, afraid. It's okay. And we'll know that when you do, that we've had this conversation. And, you know, the metaphor that I use for folks is, it's a pretty simple one, but if you had a near drowning event when you were 4 years old in a swimming pool, it might be that the way that you are going to most effectively make sure that you don't ever have that experience again is that you just never go back to the pool. But now you're in your mid-20s, and all your friends, they want to have pool parties, and they want you to come. They want you to be in this space relationally. They want you to be in this space. And even thinking about going to a pool party, your heart rate goes up, and like you get short of breath. Like you don't like it. Like you're sitting in your apartment. You're not even thinking about it. You're not going. And the only way that you're going to learn how to be with your friends, and you have to decide, is that what I would do? I want a life that is flourishing, or am I going to want a life in which I'm just going to live practicing containing all of my fear? I'm going to burn all that energy doing that. If you want to have relationships, then you're going to have to go to the pool. And you're like, I don't want to go to the pool. You're like, okay, you can't learn how to swim online. Okay, you don't get to do that. But if you had a friend who said, look, you come to the pool, and for the first few times that you come, we're just going to sit on the deck in our street clothes, and you're going to smell the chlorine, you're going to hear the chop of the water, and you are going to you're going to feel distress. But I'm going to be with you, and we're just going to do some breathing work together. We're just going to stand, sit, just be there. And after a while, you're more comfortable because all you're doing is coming to the pool and sitting on the deck. That's all you're doing. And then they say, hey, you're doing pretty well. You're not like come and bring your swim trunks. And all we're going to do is put our feet in the pool. And the same thing's going to happen all over again. Like you're going to get anxious. All these things happen all over. And then you find you're comfortable with that, and so forth and so on until you're going off the high dive. But it's because you're not by yourself in the process. And you know, our listeners are often like, well, we hear this and we have the sense of, and we think like, well, what can I do? What will I do by myself? And like, we want to say like, there is no I that does anything. We do things. And you might think, I don't know anybody who would do this with me. Well, I would want you to know that it might take some work and some risk to think of one person that you want to tell your story to, one person that you want to consider sitting with you on the edge of the pool. And there is no other way to do this. It's like there's no way to kind of have you like bypass the hard work of developing intimate relationships. It's just the way it is. It's kind of like you can't really, if you want to build a plane, you got to keep gravity in mind, and it's not going to like excuse itself from the equation when you're at Boeing.
And it's almost, you have to consciously choose vulnerability, and it feels risky, and scary. And and here's the thing. Vulnerability is risky and scary for everybody at some point. Right.
There's nobody who's immune to that fear. I'm not immune to it. Like I
think that's why, like, even when I said it, it's like we both like, yes. Yeah. We both have the understanding because we also
oh my gosh
can sit right in it. Yeah. So how do you feel like when we talk about being known and being vulnerable, taking risks? I also, and so this is like for our personal story, but then at the same time, my brain goes to like, how does this, or what does this look like in the church? And how do we as a church, even if we're not in leadership, but how do we as church members come around those people?
Yeah. So I think the way I would respond to that is, you know, when we when the word church passes our lips, every one of our listeners is going to have some idea
Right.
about how we're using that word. What do we mean by that? And, for some, it's like, oh, it's a thing that I go to on Sunday mornings or Saturday night maybe, and I have it's a worship thing, and I do these things, and I have a small group that I attend, and I do that, and I'm doing that week in and week out. I've been doing that. I'm a young adult. I'm a middle-aged adult. I'm all these, and that's church. Mm-hmm. For others, they think church, and it's one painful memory after another. They want nothing more to do with it because when they hear church, they have a story that unfolds before them of nothing but sadness and trauma and disappointment and all the things.
You relive a memory, or you see a person.
Right. And so it's like, it's like uttering Auschwitz to someone, right? It's like that's what gets conjured. It's interesting. One of the things that for me that has been happening over the last 15 to 20 years is that the emergence of the studies in neuroscience and attachment and so forth, this realm of interpersonal neurobiology that I talk about, it is coming off the page of the first page of Paul's letter to the church at Rome, when he writes, from the beginning, the creation has demonstrated God's power and his nature. And people have known about God through this way. And interpersonal neurobiology is part of the created world that is speaking about God's nature and his power to us, if we're willing to listen. And one of the things that we can learn when it comes to interpersonal neurobiology, how it speaks to a flourishing mind, how it speaks to a mind that is growing, how it speaks to developing a more resilient mind, a resilient body, resilient community. We learn some things from that. We learn about the importance of storytelling. We learn about the importance of limits. We learn about the importance of being seen, soothed, safe, secure. We learn about the importance of how, safety is as much about self-restraint as it is about being protected from things outside of myself. We learn about a whole range of things that when you then turn to the text of Scripture, you learn that the Scripture is telling the story and the neuroscience is describing the mechanics of that very story. And then when we look at what the gospel is trying to invite us to live into, we discover that in order for me to become a person who lives in a community that represents the Sermon on the Mount, it turns out there's a lot of things that I have to do about my attachment practices, my attachment processes, or otherwise, the Beatitudes are not going to mean anything to me. They're just going to be a series of bullet points that I have to somehow try to white knuckle myself into becoming without having any idea what that means. When St. Paul writes in the 3rd chapter of Colossians, and he says, "For you have died, and your lives are hidden with Christ in God," it's a beautiful phrase. I have no idea what that means. Actually, no idea. What, other than a theological tenet, what does that even mean? Practically speaking, for me, living here in April of 2023, living in my house, living in my practice with my friends, my neighbors, what does it mean? Except that when we start paying attention to neuroscience, when we start paying attention to what we do in confessional communities, we discover that, this is where that language of St. Paul would have made more practical sense to his readers, and to us can begin once again to make sense, because we are being invited to no longer think that our spirituality is just this kind of thing on the edge of the border apart from the material world. We come to say, it has to do with what I actually do with my body. It comes to do with has to do with if I'm talking to Jess and she looks at me with caring and compassion, I have to not just bypass that. I have to take that in. This becomes the body of Jesus. This becomes the way the work of the Holy Spirit is accomplished. And that's a very different thing than sitting in a church and listening to a sermon, doing worship song like that. Those things aren't bad, but they, in the world that we actually live in, that we actually occupy, those kinds of things don't actually provide much of a robust hard deck on which to begin the foundational elements of formation. They don't. They just simply don't. It's kind of like a flyby thing that we do. It doesn't, like, we have a moment, we have, 60 to 90 minutes of some sense of having felt something that we liked when we were there. And then we leave and we go back to our real life where the world is going to form us in the way that it's been forming us now for however long we've been letting it form us. And so I think that when we start to pay attention to these things more seriously, we find that church becomes potentially a different thing. I've hinted at this notion of these confessional communities. I often tell people that if we were to begin these confessional communities, they're 90-minute groups that meet weekly. If we were to begin these confessional communities every time with a reading from the Psalm and 2 songs of worship, and halfway through we pause and have a 10-minute homily, and at the end we have the Eucharist, we'd have church. We'd have church in such a way that the majority of what's happening in that time in which this body is gathered would be committed to formation. But the formation that is taking place in the context of the homily, context of the Eucharist, the context of the worship, is just as, if not even more powerful, because it's taking place in and around the work that real humans are doing in the power of the Spirit, right? That it's not like in some abstract thing. Like, we're doing the work that the Spirit really wants us to do.
That makes me think about just in my own experience. So I grew up in a very legalistic church environment. And so my view and my memories growing up, so that would be my implicit memories, right? As I'm growing up and around my relationship with God, we're very like authoritarian and it's like X equals Y and then punishment or something like that. And so I grew up in that environment, which very much affected me as a teen and into college. And I'm 38, so everyone now knows how old I am. But I'm 38 years old, and just to show that how much of a journey it is, because we talked earlier about watching The Chosen, and I had never seen it before. I hadn't been on the bandwagon. We talked about this a couple episodes ago too. But the Jesus in that in the show,
Jonathan
in the
Rubin.
series,
Like, dude,
I had never interacted with a Jesus like that. And not that like this man is, whatever. I can see.
Oh, I don't know.
He's an actor.
I tell people I now pray to Jonathan Rubin. I like who I'm praying to.
I want to hug him, and that would be weird, potentially.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd still probably try.
Yeah.
But I had to sit in that what I knew about Jesus, what I knew about God, what I had learned in church had the ability to be different. And even in that moment, like 38 years old, I'm like sitting crying with my 3 kids on the couch. It's like, this is the Jesus that I want them to know. And because of that, I need to look at how life has affected me and to open up and to be known in that way and to let God into those parts where it's like, I can change and I can see you different and experience you different. And so I think, right, there's hope for any of us at any point in our life, but it just makes me think of our memories, our thoughts of what we've experienced about our life and about God can change if it's almost sitting in the moment. And maybe that's like sitting in a memory or sitting in a thought and not pushing it away. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, sitting in that space.
Yeah, I mean, and I too am of the 3 seasons of The Chosen, there are probably, I don't know, a dozen or a dozen and a half scenes, moments that I just go back to and like I just hit replay over and over and over again. I just want to, I could, we could name some of those that are so meaningful. And I think what's significant about that is that these things that I'm encountering, watching this, they are not coming. I'm not having an encounter with something that is primarily coming first to my left hemisphere. I'm having an encounter with something that is coming to me with the intention of meeting me in light of how the brain actually works, bottom to top and right to left. First we sense, and then we make sense of what we sense. And for many people, church is tried for a long time to go the other direction. It's top, right, left to right, and top to bottom.
So it'd be information to
right? Information to shape what you feel,
Yes.
and then hopefully that what you feel will shape what's in your body. And like, it's not that can't happen in any way, shape, or form, but it is not and in fact, there are times when it does need to happen in that way. There are times when if you were left to your own devices, you would want to kill your child. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think we should be able to, right? But like, what happens? You think, you pause, you think, your left brain comes to your rescue and it says, Jess, just take a breath. Mm-hmm. You're thinking. You take a breath, but you're thinking about your body. You take a breath, you exhale, and then you come to your child differently. Even though 30 seconds ago you were so angry, and rightly so. Like, we have these kinds of things happen. So it's not that the left brain is not ever needed to help the right brain calm in order to think, so forth. But it can only do that if we have first had enough practice with the body being calmed in the way that it was intended to be calmed in the first place. It was first intended to be calmed by the body being met on its own terms. We don't tell a newborn, hey, cut that out. Mm-hmm. Well,
that would not compute.
No, right, it wouldn't compute. But then we tell a toddler, like, this is the challenge, right? If we have kids, we have a daughter. She's an amazing preacher. We have a daughter who's a pastor, and she had words early in her development, like more words that were tumbling out of that little mouth than we could like keep count of.
You were prepared for.
And so this is part of the challenge, right? Because once a child can talk in the way that she was talking, you are hoodwinked as the adult into thinking that she also can completely understand the way that you imagine that a 2-year-old brain could understand. You can say these things, and now you should be able to understand in 30-year-old terms. And it's just not the way that it works. And so we have to be aware of these developmental things. And we have to be aware of these developmental things in ourselves. And so if I'm a leader of a church, I'm going to need to be aware that not just with individuals, but as a whole, we first want to move people into a place where they sense that they're seen, soothed, safe. And again, safe does not mean, oh, we give you whatever you want. You come to our church and you can do whatever you want. It's not like because that's not safety for a 2-year-old. Some of what safety means is that we also invite you to show restraint about certain things, certain behaviors. But we want you to know that you first can be comfortable and confident in your body. And then we want you to be curious about other things that we can help you think about. But even the things that we want you to think about, we're going to invite you to circle back around to how do you feel when you hear me say it, when you hear me tell you. And this becomes how formation takes place. It's not like, oh, I give you information and therefore you just got to go home and put it to use and then we're done. No, it's like kneading bread. It's like the painter. It's like the painter that like is trying to work out that painting on that large canvas, and he's just been going and going. Or Beethoven trying to work out his piece of music, or the sculptor. We're trying to work it out. We don't just like say it and then we're done. And I think some of the most effective ministries that I've witnessed, that I've encountered, church-based or otherwise, are those in which the leaders of the ministries are themselves practicing the kind of vulnerability, practicing the kind of formation, allowing themselves to be formed by other people who are in charge of them in such a way that they then become outposts that their parishioners can model after. Because they recognize that if the leader is being vulnerable in this way and really doing his or her work, then I can do that as well.
Does that come from being aware of how something's making you feel and then how you're conceptualizing it in your brain as a leader? I mean, is it being aware of, okay, this is how my body's responding, this is how my brain's computing this? Well,
again, I think we have, when we talk about leader, we talk about leadership.
Right. It's like what does that mean?
Exactly.
It means something, right, when I say it that someone else could.
Yeah, I mean, if I have been if I've been asked to be a pastor of a church, and I think I'm being asked to be a leader, I have an idea in my head about what that means in terms of numbers that we have to get up, and this we have to do, and I have to preach, so forth and so on. Those things are not unimportant, but one of the first things that I would say that leadership is, my friend Dave Schrader, who's a leadership consultant, likes to talk about the notion that anybody and everybody is leading and is following all the time. The question is the degree to which we're paying attention to this. And he would say that what he and his group like to talk about when they talk about leadership is a leader's job is to, in response to anyone with whom they have intimate connection. So if I'm a CEO of a company, if I'm the pastor of a church, I'm not actually leading a 200 or 2,000 member church. I'm leading 10 people on my staff. That's who I'm actually leading. Am I leading 2,000? Maybe, but no, I actually don't know 2,000 people. I'm not responsible for 2,000 people. I can't be. Jesus was not responsible for 8 billion people when he was on the planet. He was responsible for those 12 or maybe 20 or those people. That's where he was paying attention. Not that he didn't see the work of the Holy Spirit that was going to come later, but his work was I'm going to work in the here and now that I have. So we model ourselves after him, who's doing the work that is right in front of him. He's not thinking about a 2,000 member or a 5,000 member church. He's not thinking about Pentecost. He's where he is. I don't mean that he wouldn't have that in mind, but that's not where he's focusing his attention. And so if I'm the pastor and I have a large church or small church, I want to who are the people that I'm most intimately connected with? My friend Dave Schrader would say that leadership is doing whatever I can do to enable each of the people with whom I have connected relationships to flourish. That's my job. But I can't do that if I'm working with you, if I'm a senior pastor and you're an associate pastor. I can't. I want to know, what do you need from me? How can I be helpful? I want to know that I'm creating space in which you are being seen, soothed, safe, secure in your role. That's my job to do that. You're going to do well. But I'm also going to say, I also need your help. Because you're an associate pastor, you're doing certain things that will help me do my job. Here's where I'm afraid that I'm not doing a good enough job. Or I'm going to be vulnerable with you, you're going to be vulnerable with me, so forth. But you also have others, one more tier away from you that work for you, that don't work directly with me. You have a different set. But if I'm the senior pastor of the church, it's also going to be really important. That's why we say at pastors that nobody has a harder job than pastors. I don't care if your church has 50 people or if your church has 50,000 people. Nobody has a harder job. And part of the reason is because once you reach that place, nobody's coming to take care of you. I can't tell you how many pastors I've asked this question of. So tell me, whose job is it to take care of you exclusively? They have no idea what I'm talking about. It would always be assumed no, it's my job to take care. I can tell you, dude, it's not going to work. It's not going to work because the brain can't do this. But we have a system, culturally, that puts people in that position. And when we become alone, we are far more at risk for tilting toward developing empire, as Walter Brueggemann would say. And nobody's immune to it. If you're gifted, if you've got capacity to lead anything, I don't care if you're the senior pastor, I don't care if you're the father or mother in a house. We're all tempted toward empire. We're going to do things my way. It's going to become about me. And it's going to become about what I want and how I'm going to develop this. And you turn around and look at history and look at empires, right? You get the book of Revelation. You just see all the empires that are falling. Mm-hmm. And Jesus came to say, and he said to Pilate, my empire is not like you think it is. That's not my kingdom. If it were my kingdom, these people would be taking up arms. You notice that's not happening. You don't have any word to speak over me in my kingdom. You only have what was given to you. But I got to tell you, I'm tempted to empire every time I'm in any position in which I start to feel good about the things that I'm doing. But to the degree that is the case, it's often also the case that I'm feeling somewhere isolated, alone, and I'm having to take care of myself. And so for pastors, one of the most important things that we would want for them is to answer the question, to have in place for them, who are the people to whom they are going to go, who are going to care for them And it's not going to be under anybody else's jurisdiction. Like the elders aren't going to oversee that. His paycheck's not going to not be connected to that. Like her status is not going to be connected to that. She's going to be cared for by somebody else. How's that going to happen? We are way off track, maybe. But
no, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm in it, tracking, following, and I don't know what you're saying, but I have thought of a totally different question that I want to ask.
Yeah.
But it can be like one of our last.
Okay.
But so kind of like taking a little pivot from what we're talking about as a clinician, and I think just like /mom /Christ follower, friend, whatever label we carry.
All the things.
I think one thing that I see a lot, and I'd love to hear your talk about, I hear a lot in different ways of people saying like, why is God taking so long, or why is he not answering, or I've been waiting for not just days or weeks, but years. And I don't know. I think that at our core, we're asking that question when maybe we don't feel like we're hearing from him. And so can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I think that the fact that we're even asking the question is embedded in the question. Like, because if I can give you an answer, then, oh, okay, thanks. And we have the answer.
Yeah, could you?
Yeah, you're really.
Can I have your? Can we put your phone number up now?
That's the second. You've played.
Oh, shoot.
You're a good card player, and that's the second really well played card
thank you.
today. So yeah, I mean, there are some realities about the world that I don't like.
Same.
Like I don't like the aging process. I don't like that I can't play basketball like I did 10 years ago. I don't like that I've lost 3 brothers to cancer. I don't like some of the unfinished relational business that I have in my life. Like, I don't like it. And I certainly don't like the nature of how God seems to think that it's okay to take this long to do things. Now, the thing is, like, and so in some respects, I would say my own life, because I can name a lot of things about which I would wish God would be like quicker on the uptake here. Like, it seems like he hasn't learned from his mistakes with me. I don't know why he's not, doing
so
this.
many in.
Yeah. Like, and it's interesting. Like, I guess my life is also kind of a microcosm of the entire arc of the biblical narrative. Like, God's taking a long time for the whole picture, not just a long time for me. And then we read in the New Testament that God is patient because he's not willing for anybody to be lost. I'm thinking like, I'm not lost. I just need, I'm not lost,
right
okay?
here.
Like, I'm right here?
Yeah.
Like, hello? Right, I'm not here. I just need you to get on with it. Like, now that we're here, let's right?
Right.
And I think, and this is where the work, I think, I don't know about you, I have found the work of Richard Schwartz in Internal Family Systems to be really helpful in a lot of respects. I'm like,
completely.
That's been really helpful stuff.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking like, it turns out that there are parts of me that still are, that are lost. And it is far easier for me. My grief has everything to do with the parts of me that have not yet been healed and are really afraid to come into the light. And what I'd rather God do is somehow wave his wand so that wherever my grief is housed and wherever it's hiding out, somehow the wand will just dissolve it. And I tend, this is the same part of me and the same part of many of us, I think, that like have this imagined, we read certain texts in Thessalonians where Paul writes and says that in the twinkling of an eye, everything's going to change. And indeed, we have every reason to believe that the new heaven and the earth, at the Parousia, at the appearance of Jesus, the second, everything is going to happen. But I think that what we tend to think is that what's going to happen is that change is going to mean that everything about me, everything about the world that is bad is in the twinkle of an eye going to become exactly what it was intended to be. Magic, one moment. And I'm not so sure that's the case because that's not exactly what the text says. The text just says that everything will change. And is it not possible that what the text is getting at is that everything will change in such a way that we are now going to find ourselves in the place in which we can finally do the work that Jesus wants us to do. It's just that shame and violence will not be part of the conversation. It will not be part of the work. And they're like, great. And then you think great.
Right.
Until we decide that no, he's actually quite serious about now going to all those places that you've been resisting all of your life. And he's going to say, now let's work on this. Now let's work on this. And I'm like, again, we were saying this earlier today, what the heck? This will take forever. To which he would say, I know. That's why we have forever. And I think this whole notion of suffering and how long it takes and all the things that are so maddening about the world in general, about my family, about me, is an invitation by God for him to say, Curt, for those places that are not yet finished, I want to know your grief. I want to have it. I want to hold it. I want you to come to me with I want to go into the rooms where it all is hidden. Let's do the work. Because I think it is also a function of how he takes us so much more seriously than we take ourselves. He's far more serious about those places than we are. I just want him to chop. Let's get it done.
Right.
And he's like, no, I want you to be a full participant in this. I want you to be fully on board with what I want you to be doing. If you just want me to magically get rid of it, that means that you suddenly become an NBA #1 draft pick without having to do any of the work, without knowing what it really is going to require to be on the court with LeBron. You won't have to if that happens, you're going to find out pretty quickly, you don't really have what it takes. Really, you don't want me changing you like this. I'm
oh yeah.
And then, but we would say, look, this is also why Jesus is saying, the world would know that you love me, that you're my disciples, because of how you love one another. I mean, this is what God is saying. It's not just, Jess, it's not just you up by yourself. I want you to do that work with your husband, with your kids, and with your friends. And even do it with Curt. And Curt, you do it with Jess, and with Phyllis, my wife, and with my, I want you guys to know, you are not doing it by yourself. It's not just I've got 8 billion silos now that are all having to do their own individual work. No, we're all part of the family. I want us all to be working together for everybody's benefit. Part of how shame and trauma shapes and kind of, we might say, shatters my capacity to see reality is that it does not allow me to perceive that I am connected to you. And that therefore, if I'm going to be okay, I got to be known by you. You have to be known by me. And that is the only way. It's if I want to fly a plane, I got to keep gravity in mind because that's the way it is. And this is the way it is. And I think what we come to find is that when we are willing to work with the way God has made the world to work, we find that joy and glory are what we find. It's and it's a really beautiful thing.
Thank you for answering that and just for sitting with me today. Is there anything that you feel like we missed, or Jess didn't ask that question, but man, I wish she would have?
Goodness.
I know I opened it up.
Well, I don't know. I just want to say this to our listeners that I said this earlier. Every place I go, I say this because I just think it's true. That following Jesus is really hard to do. And he didn't mix or mince any words about it. I mean, he didn't, he said the cross is the metaphor we're going to use. We're not going to use the house. We're not going to use the car, the job. That you're going to pick up your cross. And he wasn't trying to frighten people. But he wasn't flinching either. And so I think it's important for us to know that what feels like it's hard is not because, again, it's not because we're stupid or just because we're unwilling or all that, it's because evil wants to devour us, and we are pushing against the earth. And we carry a lot, we just have acres of fear of our shame that we carry. As I tell people, life is very simple and excruciatingly difficult, but it's not difficult because it's complicated. It's difficult because of our grief. It's difficult because of the ocean of fear and shame that we walk around with that just infects everything. Every thought, every feeling, every commentary, every story that I tell. And to the degree that I am willing to do that work, I will suddenly discover that life is actually very simple. It's just that it's a repeat of the thing I've just been doing. Oh, like I'm having to work through that fear, that fear, that fear, that fear. Yeah, it's a lot. And what I typically will do is, because that's so overwhelming, I will instead just create layer upon layer upon layer of lattice works of stories that will help me avoid the shame and the fear. And so now that I'm 10 stories deep in all my layers of storytelling, I can just say, oh no, it's complicated. It's not, but it is really hard. And so my hope is for people to know that God is with us, God is for us, and God is looking to create within us and through us outposts of beauty and goodness in the world.
Thank you for sharing that. If anybody wants to, I guess, follow along, learn more about what you're doing, what would be a good way to get a hold of you? What's your phone number?
Yeah. Did she really do that one where they're like, gosh, I'm telling
sorry,
you, like it's like, we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention to Jess at the poker table, and the next thing you know, she's got four of a kind. She's got four of a kind. Like that is just, oh dang. Okay. You can reach me. I don't know if you like have show notes or anything, but you can like the slide that from today. You can reach me through a website, CurtThompsonMD.com. You can listen to me through the podcast, the Being Known podcast.
Love that.
And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook.
No TikTok dances for you.
Oh,
all right. So everything else except that.
Oh.
And you have a couple books to look up too. The Anatomy of the Soul.
Anatomy of the Soul, The Soul of Shame, and The Soul of Desire. And then in August is coming, the title is The Deepest Place, Suffering and the Formation of Hope.
Ooh,
so
sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Dr. Curt Thompson. And thank you all for joining us today. We love you here at the Uncomfortable Podcast and are so thankful that you joined us. And so till next time, we'll talk to you then.